Hi again, everybody. It is Victor from Playbook, the over under guy, and we will return to our Mark Lawrence Against the Spread podcast in just a minute since it's fresh in my mind. And I just completed this week's issue of the Playbook Totals Tip Sheet newsletter. Let's run through a really quick review of last week and a preview of this week in the NFL. Of course, we are 3 weeks into the NFL season right now. And once again, last week, it was another totals turnaround. We've gone from low scoring, that was week one, to high scoring, week two, and back to another low scoring week three, of course, in a 3 week span to start the 2023 season. Yeah, I know. Despite a record breaking 90-point game down here in hot South Florida last week, it was still an overall low scoring weekend in the NFL. The official results last week, only 5 overs, 11 games ended up going under the total. Average points per game last week in the NFL, 44.1. So we've gone from a week one average of 41 points per game to a week two average of 49 points per game and back to a week three average of 44.1 points per game. However, if we remove that 90-point Miami Denver shootout from the mix, the averages were much more in line with what happened in week number one, only 41.1 combined points per game. If you read this week's totals newsletter, there are two aspects from a totals perspective that have been very revealing this season. Number one, when you compare the early kickoff games on Sundays, the 1 o'clock starts, to the late afternoon kickoff games, the 4:05 starts, there's been quite the difference in scoring. NFL games that kick off at 1 o'clock on Sunday have only averaged 42.7 points per game, but the late afternoon kickoff games have averaged 52.3 combined points per game. Those are the games that you may want to consider this week as far as overs, as again, the late afternoon kickoff games have averaged 10 points per game more than their counterparts in the early Sunday kickoff games. And one more thing that we may add, and of course, I mentioned it on the title of this week's totals tip sheet, the prime time night games and the high tendency for those games to go under the total. Last week in the NFL, Thursday night game between San Francisco New York Giants, under. Sunday night game between the Raiders and the Steelers, under. Monday night game between the Bengals and the Rams, under. And our play, the Monday night game between the Eagles and the Buccaneers, under the total. All four of last week's primetime games went under the total. They've now gone 2-9 over under on the season. That's two night games that have gone over. Nine of them have gone under. And it's been a very consistent pattern now over a 2 year period. NFL night games have now gone 21 overs, 43 unders. That's 67% under in the last 2 years. If you have not joined us on these primetime games under the total, you've missed out on some big bucks. Now, what do we got this week in the NFL? Across the pond. That's right. The international series of games is back in 23. It starts this week in Wembley Stadium in London with the Jaguars taking on the Atlanta Falcons. This is one of 5 games scheduled in Europe this season. One will be played in Wembley, two in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, two more in Frankfurt, Germany. And what we will note about this particular venue, Wembley Stadium in London, the last 6 international games played here, like this Jacksonville Atlanta game, have gone under the total with an average of only 35.3 combined points per game. That is the way we will be leading in this first of the international series of games in the NFL. This is also a very, very good week for division games to go under the total. And there are indeed a handful of those games this particular week. Now, if you're looking for one over to bet, we're going to give the ball to our boy Tuco, and he's playing a team total this week, and he's going to be going to the Lone Star State and playing the Houston Texans to go over their team total of 19 and a half points as they host the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. We're talking about a hot Houston team and a hot rookie quarterback in C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. The first-year player has already exceeded expectations. He's the best rookie quarterback thus far by far. He has a top 5 passer rating. He's gone over 300 passing yards per game on the season, not to mention multiple rookie records. And not only that, though, but with Stroud at the helm, Houston has now already gone over their team total in all 3 games this season. The culmination, of course, was last week, that 34-point road beatdown of the Jacksonville Jaguars, as Stroud had a 118.8 quarterback rating and 9.3 yards per passing attempt. The good thing for us in this game, it's a modest total that we're asking to go over. We only need Houston to score 20 or more points. Now, I know the thought of playing against a vaunted Steelers defense, it's a little bit difficult. But this is the same Pittsburgh defense that is allowed 23.3 points per game on the season, and they just gave up 324 passing yards to Jimmy Garoppolo last week. So there you have it. Tuco's team total of the week is for the Houston Texans to score over 19 and a half points as they host the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's this week's free play for week 4 in the NFL. We're going to get back to the Mark Lawrence Against the Spread podcast. Don't forget, this week's issue of the Totals Tip Sheet is available at the playbooksports.com website. And all of our King Creole selections, our handicap selections, available as well. We start in the NFL season with a very, very good record of 11-4 documented. And, of course, if you want the shortcut to get to our King Creole selections, the website shortcut down there is pb.buzz/VK. Just paste that right into your web browser. That'll take you right to the King Creole page so you can profit this week in pro football as well. That's it for this week. We'll talk to you next week in week 5. And let's get back to the Mark Lawrence podcast.